Can a man be found guilty of a crime even if there is no evidence against him? And if we let that genie out of the bottle, what is going to happen to law and justice? Ciao everyone, this is Nate on the Stone. Welcome back to my channel. Those are the questions we're going to be looking at this time around. And remember that if you like videos of culture, political, and religious commentary from a different point of view, then subscribe to my channel and ring the bell to get notifications every time I post new videos. So, confession time. I didn't really want to make another video about Brett Kavanaugh and his confirmation hearings, at least not so soon from my last one. I actually had a whole list of other ideas for this video, but circumstances dictated otherwise. Don't worry, that list is still there. I didn't delete it. We are going to get to all of those topics in due time. By now, I'm sure you've all heard about Professor Christina Ford and the allegations that she has leveled against Brett Kavanaugh, claiming that when he was 17 and she was 15, he tried to rape her and actually sexually assaulted her while he was drunk at a party they were both attending. Now, many other people have already pointed out the holes, contradictions, and just the general haziness in Ford's claims, some of which include, for example, the fact that she cannot remember when the party was exactly or at whose house the party was held. The fact that she waited 30 years before coming forward and saying anything to anybody about this sexual assault. The fact that Ford says that she only came forward with her story because she felt pressure to do so by the press, and yet hired a prominent sexual assault lawyer and took a polygraph test before even going to the media with her story. And there's the fact that one of Ford's classmates, Christina Miranda, claimed on a Facebook post that yes, the sexual assault was talked about for days in school after it occurred, even though in Ford's account the assault allegedly took place in the summertime. She didn't tell anybody about the assault until 2012, and that Miranda herself later told NPR that she couldn't be sure if the assault had actually taken place or not. In spite of the holes, the contradictions, and the general haziness of Ford's story, people have started acting as if Kavanaugh has already been indicted, put on trial, and convicted of a crime. Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut has said that Kavanaugh needs to remove himself from the nomination because his presence on the Supreme Court would put a stain on the court. Evan Siegfried, who has admitted that he was thrilled when President Trump nominated Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, and who still admits that Kavanaugh's qualifications for the SCOTUS seat are unimpeachable, has said that Kavanaugh needs to remove himself from the nomination, partly because of the nature of the allegations themselves, and partly because Siegfried admits that he just believes a woman's allegations when it comes to sexual assault. Sandra Newman over at the Washington Post wrote that if we really cared about victims of sexual assault, then Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court would be removed. And Skeet over at Market Watch said basically the same thing, and even implied that if Kavanaugh was confirmed to the Supreme Court, we would basically be giving a green light for sexual assault and rape to be accepted by society. So, just to recap, in spite of the holes, contradictions, and haziness of Ford's story, in spite of the fact that there is no corroborating evidence for her story, in spite of the fact that there are no witnesses to back up her story, people are saying that Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court needs to be revoked based solely on the nature of the allegations themselves. And these developments are important, but they're not important for the reason that one might think. This goes beyond the Trump presidency, Trump's agenda. This goes beyond his nomination for the Supreme Court. This goes beyond putting a conservative, or as I like to think of it, an originalist majority on the court. This goes beyond all of that. What this really gets down to is what sort of a society do we want to live in? America is supposed to be a nation of laws and not of men, like John Adams said. Why is that important? Because a nation of men, whether we're talking about a king, a dictator, an aristocracy, an oligarchy, blows wherever it wants. If a certain group of people, whether because of their skin color or their ethnicity or their religion or their political beliefs become undesirable, then the powers that be, the people in charge, can start harassing and persecuting them because nothing really matters in that society except for the will of the rulers. History is full of examples like this, whether we're talking about the Christians in the old Muslim caliphates and in a lot of modern countries in the Middle East today, whether we're talking about the English persecuting the Irish, or whether we're talking about the Great Purges that took place in the USSR during Joseph Stalin's rule. Only the goodwill of the ruler stands between a person or a group and persecution, and when that goodwill turns sour, all hell is going to break loose. Nations of laws, on the other hand, have as their core the idea that the law is supreme and that everyone, whether we're talking about Joe Schmo, the janitor at the local YMCA, to Jeff Bezos, is equal before the law, regardless of your political opinions, religious beliefs, or annual income, or anything like that. This is the reason why justice is shown as a blindfolded woman. It's because people are supposed to be judged according to the facts and not according to anything else. A fundamental principle of the judicial system of the United States and of the rule of law itself is the idea of the presumption of innocence, the idea that a man is innocent until he's proven guilty, which is a judicial idea that originated all the way back in ancient Rome and which was brought to America from England. And it's a fundamental principle because, in essence, it protects the individual from the power of the state. If Joe Schmo, our janitor at the local YMCA, is accused of a crime, the state can't just use the allegation to say that Joe's guilty and throw him into jail. Instead, the presumption of innocence means that all of the work is on the shoulders of the state. The state has to go through the trouble of marshaling facts and evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Joe actually is guilty of the crime he's accused of. This doesn't mean necessarily that people can't be assumed innocent or guilty automatically in places outside of a court of law, like the court of public opinion. A good example of this is the Duke lacrosse team case of 2006, when Crystal Magnum accused the white players of the Duke lacrosse team of gang raping her. Almost immediately, these players were strung up as examples of racism in modern America, and the New York Times dragged their names through the mud at the national level. Now, eventually, there was so much evidence compiled against Magnum's accusations that the players were found not guilty, but the damage had already been done. Now, these examples are wrong, they're terrible, and they're tragedies for the people who are unjustly accused of crimes. But it also serves to show why courts of public opinion are separate from courts of law. And this is what we risk losing if Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court is allowed to be terminated because of the allegations themselves with no corroborating evidence. The replacement of the rule of law with the rule of feelings or ideology. The court of law replaced with the court of public opinion. Now, you might be thinking at this point, Nate, you're overreacting. Fundamental principles of society don't change overnight just because one guy's nomination is overturned. And no, I'm not saying that if Brett Kavanaugh's nomination is overturned this week, that at the beginning of October, the fundamental principles of society will have changed. What I am saying, though, is there's that old saying, be careful about letting the genie out of the bottle, because it's really hard to put him back in. What do I mean by that? To give a concrete example, Dr. David Berlinski has described the atrocities of the 20th century, the Holocaust, the terror famines and the purges of the USSR, the killing fields of Cambodia, as a black obelisk which cannot be removed either from history or from our own minds, which means that the lines crossed by these actions, 6 million people exterminated in Nazi Germany just because of their ethnicity, for example, cannot be uncrossed. They are going to stay until the end of time as examples to evil men everywhere, a fact which can actually be seen today when you look at North Korea or Iran or South Africa, just to pull 3 examples out of thin air. It's the same thing here. If Kavanaugh's nomination is allowed to be derailed because of the nature of the allegations themselves, and no evidence is necessary to support those allegations, then another line will be crossed, and the genie will be let out of the bottle again. Instead of a person being innocent until proven guilty, it'll be just the opposite. You'll be guilty until proven innocent, which means naturally that the presumption of innocence will be shredded, but which also means that the rule of law is going to be a hoax. Instead of everyone being equal under the law, everyone instead will potentially be under the sword, because allegations, instead of just being the preview of an investigation and possibly a trial, will become weapons themselves. You don't like someone just because he belongs to a certain religion, or because he comes from a certain background, or because he thinks in a certain way? Bring up allegations of some crime and he will automatically be thought guilty. We will live in an unsafe and an unfree society because we will live in Animal Farm, where everyone, of course, is equal, but the people who are in power at the time will be more equal than everybody else. And whoever is in power at the time will be able to bring up allegations against their enemies, and their enemies will be automatically thought guilty no matter what the evidence or the lack of evidence says. But what say you? Will the derailment of Kavanaugh's nomination help replace the rule of law with the rule of feelings and ideology? Or is this just politics as usual and nothing really to get all that excited about? As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Well, that's all for right now, gang. Remember, if you liked this video, whether you agree with me or not, subscribe to my channel and ring that bell for notifications, because I post new videos like this every Tuesday and you won't want to miss them. Thanks again to everyone for watching, and I will see you all again here next week on Top of the Stone. Ciao.